in 1971. We are fortunate today to have presentations by eminent personalities. Our first speaker today, who has recorded a presentation for the audience, is Chris Blackburn. Chris is an expert in history and sociopolitics of Bangladesh for more than 2 decades. Chris Blackburn is a foreign affairs expert, communications director of the European Bangladesh Forum.
Honourable members of Congress, staff members, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to speak today on political developments in Bangladesh, a country which is growing in strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific theatre. To fully understand modern Bangladesh, we must revisit the pivotal events of 1971, when the country fought to free itself from Pakistan's rule. In the 1970 elections, the Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, achieved a sweeping victory and demanded autonomy. Rather than honour the result, Pakistan's leadership launched Operation Searchlight on March 25, 1971. The campaign was brutal. Dhaka, the capital, became a killing field overnight, with professors, students, civilians, and especially the minority Hindus were singled out for execution. Even Americans were not spared. Father William Evans from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, was shot at point-blank range by Pakistani forces for being Christian. In the face of widespread international silence, one American official, Archer K. Blood, dared to speak out. In his now famous Blood telegram, he condemned what he described as genocide, sharply criticising the White House for its failures to denounce the atrocities. This diplomatic rift continues to reverberate, contributing to long-standing tensions and suspicions in US-India relations. 3 million people were killed and more than 200,000 Bengali women were subjected to mass rape. 10 million refugees fled to India, with millions more internally displaced. Against overwhelming odds, Bangladesh, aided by Indian forces, eventually secured its independence. Yet today, elements of Muhammad Yunus's administration and radical Islamist factions seek to challenge or outright deny these foundational truths. They go so far as to recast the war criminals in 1971 as liberators, effectively rewriting the very history upon which Bangladesh was built. History has always moved in dramatic. Opponents were arrested en masse, dissent was met with force, and allegations of electoral fraud mounted with each successive election. Discontent grew until it erupted into mass protests, setting the stage for her removal last year. To fully grasp this moment, we must recall the caretaker government crisis of January 11, 2007, simply now known as 111. Then Bangladesh teetered on the brink of chaos, with Sheikh Hasina and her long-time rival Khalida Zia locked in a power struggle, while Al-Qaeda and other groups tried to get a foothold in the country. The result was a military-backed caretaker government that claimed to offer technocratic governance as a short-term fix to stop a potential civil war. During that interlude, Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus attempted to bold entry into politics by announcing his party, Nagarik Shakti, or Citizens' Power. Global accolades for his microfinance model, especially through Grameen Bank, had already earned him significant Western support, including strong ties with American political figures like Bill and Hillary Clinton. But domestic politics proved more difficult. Yunus's political experiment fizzled out and he withdrew, only to re-emerge years later. The Monsoon Revolution and minority persecution. The turmoil that unseated Hasina has been dubbed the Monsoon Revolution, yet a darker undercurrent ran beneath the revolutionary fervour. There was the targeted persecution of minority communities, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and indigenous peoples, who were subjected to coordinated violence. Instead of confronting the reality of religious intolerance, government officials around Yunus framed these attacks as purely political, not fueled by religious extremists. Perpetrators went unpunished, reinforcing the climate of fear among minorities. In an especially concerning turn, movements such as ISKCON or the Hare Krishna movement in Bangladesh founded themselves labelled as terrorists. The grim record in Bangladesh cannot be separated from its history of persecuting religious minorities. At independence, the country was envisioned as secular, but waves of violence have undermined this promise for decades. Hindus once numbered close to 30% of what was then East Pakistan in 1947. Today hover at around 7%. Draconian legal mechanisms like the Enemy Property Act, later renamed the Vested Property Act, facilitate the confiscation of Hindu-owned lands, forcing many to flee. Mob attacks on Hindu temples and festivals continue to this day, with perpetrators often escaping justice. The Ahmadi Muslims, who have been similarly targeted, they've been labelled heretics by groups such as Hafazadi Islam and the radical Jamaat Islam. In 2004, the BNP Jamaat government capitulated to extremist forces and banned Ahmadi publications. The community faces boycotts, threats and regular harassment, with limited recourse to state protection. Christians have also encountered hostility. Churches have been attacked and set on fire, pastors killed and threatened, and congregations intimidated or forced to convert. Though a small minority, Christians remain vulnerable to attacks from Islamist extremists. Buddhists and the indigenous people in the Chittagong Hill Tracts endure systematic marginalisation, suffering land sieges and cultural erasure. In each case, Bangladesh government action is minimal. If Bangladesh hopes to preserve any vestige of pluralism, it must break this pattern of impunity. The rise of intolerance and brutal government crackdowns. Meanwhile, violent crackdowns against the dissent have intensified. Last month, Yunus launched Operation Devil Hunt. Police and security forces have used heavy-handed tactics to suppress protests over social, political and economic grievances. Government critics, including journalists and opposition figures, have found themselves incarcerated without due process. While the seen as downfall removed one oppressive regime, powerful new forces have lurked in the background. Amidst this chaos, the United Kingdom and others have updated their security assessments on Bangladesh, warning visitors of rising religious Islamist extremism, escalating attacks on students, minority religious congregations, and progressive voices underscore the power of radical Islamists. Their growing influence has coincided with the installation of the Yunus interim government, raising international fears that the country's fragile democratic experiment has been collapsing under pressure from extremist factions. Human rights defenders in Bangladesh have grown conspicuously silent. A recent Human Rights Watch report titled "After the Monsoon Revolution, a Roadmap to Lasting Security Sector Reform in Bangladesh" spotlighted a familiar pattern of abuses. Though the interim government pledged to break with the past, Human Rights Watch alleged that new ways of repression by the Yunus administration have targeted perceived Awami League supporters and government critics. Yunus's government has also stripped journalists of their press credentials, and they've continued with the policy of stifling free speech. Reporters Without Borders have also publicly condemned these steps. The Human Rights Watch report offered a range of proposals from repealing draconian laws that muzzle critics to establishing checks on security forces. Yet many activists, once vocal under the Hasina regime, have not pressed these issues under Yunus's rule for fear of being labelled as supporters of the former government. The press are also facing violent campaigns by radical Islamists to curb their reporting. Prothama Law and the Daily Star facing the worst of these coordinated attacks. Despite international hopes that Yunus would usher in reforms, his administration quickly caught controversy. One of the most disturbing moves involves releasing al-Qaeda-linked figures, individuals once imprisoned on charges of plotting against Western targets. Many have warned that freeing such figures could transform Bangladesh into a fertile ground for global jihad. Corruption scandal also riddled the legal system. High-profile investigations involving the FBI and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have been unceremoniously dropped. Witnesses have gone silent, cases have been dismissed on flimsy technicalities, and those accused of massive graft conveniently walk free. Those involved in terrorism have also been let off. Opponents claim that in Yunus's Bangladesh, the judicial apparatus has once again become an instrument of selective justice. Even more shocking in Bangladesh has been the warming relationship with Pakistan, its former oppressor from 1971. This deliberate rapprochement has alarmed neighbouring India, which had historically supported Bangladesh's independence. Some in Bangladesh threaten to reignite tensions in Assam and other vulnerable border areas in India, suggesting a massive tilt towards Islamabad. A corresponding national debate launched by military figures on the possibility of Bangladesh acquiring nuclear weapons from Pakistan has made regional stability an even more pressing concern. In the midst of these tense developments, Muhammad Yunus remained largely silent despite his international stature. His unwillingness to publicly address the potential risk of nuclear proliferation have baffled critics at home and abroad. Bangladesh stands at a defining junction. Born from the bloodshed of 1971, it once aspired to be a secular, democratic nation, but now risks succumbing to a vicious cycle of authoritarian rule and Islamist extremism. The ouster of Sheikh Hasina brought hope for change, but has so far failed to deliver genuine reform. Mohammed Yunus appears ill-prepared for the entrenched challenges he faces. Even worse, he appears willing to accommodate extremists, as evidenced by his appointment of a former Hafazadi Islam leader to oversee religious affairs. Hafazadi Islam has long demanded anti-blasphemy laws, anti-women policies, and aggressively confronted Bangladesh's secular and pluralist traditions, making this move profoundly unsettling to those who fear surging religious militancy and intolerance. Why did Yunus give unknown fundamentalists to sit at the table? Bangladesh's soul is at stake. Radical Islamists are actively challenging the state. Today, Bangladesh must decide, will it remain true to the promise that emerged from the trauma of 1971, or will it allow a new tyranny, fueled by intolerance and injustice, to define its future? The nation's next step will determine whether it can transform the storm of the monsoon revolution into a lasting peace that honours the lives sacrificed for freedom. America also faces a difficult balancing act. Does it support Yunus, a friend of the USA, who is making the exact same mistakes as Sheikh Hasina while failing to challenge Islamist extremism? Or will America simply walk away and leave it to others? Thank you all for your time.
We thank Chris Blackburn for his message and his insightful analysis of what is currently happening in Bangladesh. Before I introduce our next speaker, I would request the audience to again make sure that all their phones are on silent mode. And if your children are not partaking of the discussions, please do provide them some outlet in the right outside the corridor. We appreciate your presence and we appreciate your understanding with our requests. So I am extremely honored to present our next speaker, Michael Rubin. Michael Rubin is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. A former Pentagon official, Dr. Rubin has lived in post-revolution Iran, Yemen, and both pre- and post-war Iraq. He also spent time with the Taliban before 9/11. For more than a decade, he taught classes at sea about the Horn of Africa and Middle East conflicts, culture, and terrorism to deployed U.S. Navy and Marine units. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Rubin.
Thank you very much. I'm a historian by training, which means I get paid to predict the past. I have some experience in Bangladesh, having been an election observer there in 2008 in Dhaka and Chittagong. But my expertise and my doctorate are a little bit broader. My PhD is actually in Iranian history. And as an academic, I've tried to take a comparative approach because too often American policy is undermined by a number of phenomena, a number of mistakes which repeat consistently. Sometimes we allow ourselves to calibrate American policy towards wishful thinking. We don't want to admit what's going on. We don't want to recognize the reality. And therefore, we just close our eyes and hope for the best. Sometimes we actively calibrate our policy to the past as well. For too long, for example, in Turkey, we pretended that Turkey was no different under Recep Tayyip Erdogan than it was under many other prime ministers before. And of course, the first rule of holes is when you're in a hole, stop digging. But if we embrace our wishful thinking, then we actually make the matter 10 times worse. Let me just talk very briefly about why I worry so much about Bangladesh today. I worry because I see in Bangladesh many of the same patterns which I've seen with regard to Iran and with regard to Turkey as well. I was only 7 years old at the time, so I'm reading this now after the fact. But of course, many of you remember that in 1978, Ayatollah Khomeini was in exile. For the last year of his exile, he was at a chateau outside of Paris. And when he was outside of Paris, he met with reporters almost every single day. Reporters from the Associated Press, reporters from the Washington Post, the New York Times, from Austrian newspapers, from French newspapers, and so forth. And he would say wonderful things. I have no interest in personal power. All I want to do is unseat the dictator and then usher in a new democracy. And indeed, many Iranians bought the rhetoric. And what many people forget, 1% of Americans took part in our American Revolution. 2% of Frenchmen or Russians took part in the French Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution. A full 10% of Iranians took part in the Islamic Revolution in 1979. They were united in what they were against. They were against the Shah at the time, whom they saw as too much of a dictator. But they didn't necessarily agree on a platform moving forward. And Ayatollah Khomeini played them masterfully. He said, I believe in an Islamic democracy. He never explained what that meant. But by the time he seized power, he started consolidating power. One of the economists, a liberal left-leaning economist, who he had embraced, Abu Hassan Bani Sadr, was soon exiled to Paris because he was no longer useful. He had already done his function, which was convince the West that this was a revolution about human rights, a revolution about democracy. But by that point, it really was too late. Now, I'm going to talk about Turkey in a moment, but I want to bring up one other issue where I see history repeating. You know the famous Supreme Court Justice, Potter Stewart, when he spoke about pornography in a famous court case about obscenity, he gave a famous brief in which he said, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. In international relations, terrorism is much the same thing. There is no international consensus definition of terror, which also allows for rhetorical games, where everyone can say they are against terrorism, but unless it happens to be for a cause with which they agree. And therefore, we get the Supreme Leader of Iran saying he's against terror, even as he sponsors Hezbollah and the Houthis. And we see this also repeating. Now, the other issue with regard to terrorism, when the United States confronts it, it can be very hard to deal with terror for two things because of the way American policymakers across administrations tie our hands together. We have a separation of church and state. We have a separation of mosque and state. Therefore, we want to project that mindset onto our policy. We don't want to have to address an ideology which is behind some religious interpretations. In fact, too often criticizing religious interpretations is seen as, for example, when it comes to Islam, somehow Islamophobic. Now, I spend a lot of my time, and my job at the American Enterprise Institute and the Middle East Forum is basically to embed myself with those who are adversaries to the United States, to go to places where the US government can't go, and to figure out how people on the ground think. Now, first of all, let me say, both American Enterprise Institute and Middle East Forum are nonprofits. I receive a salary. Neither of them take government money from any government, including the US government, nor do I accept money from anyone else. I call things as I see them. And when people suggest that calling things as you see them is somehow indicative that you must be somehow on the take, that's projection. That's an indication that they are on the take. Why does one write about Bangladesh? It's because it's in a crisis right now. A crisis of Jamaat Islami and Muhammad Yunus's own making. No other explanation than that. It's that simple. Now, when it comes to religion, like I said, I spend a lot of my time, for example, in Iraq and in southern Lebanon. Soon after the Islamic State was defeated, I was in Raqqa, the capital of the Islamic State, right after liberation. And when I'm talking to people, they're not saying that criticism of the Islamic State is somehow Islamophobic. What they're saying is theologically, we have a problem within Islam. There is a theological debate. And the people who do most of the dying at the hands of radical Islamists aren't Jews, aren't Christians, aren't Hindus, they're fellow Muslims themselves. The people that are getting thrown off the buildings by the Islamic State for allegedly being gay, or murdered for smoking a cigarette or watching a football game, most of those were moderate Muslims. Likewise, in Afghanistan, so-called green on blue violence, where people we were training would turn their guns on their NATO trainers, what we often forgot is the rate of green on green violence was 3 times as high. When Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan said the Afghans didn't fight for their freedom, let's not forget something like 30, 40, 50,000 Afghan national security forces died for their freedom, fighting the Taliban. And so this notion that somehow it is against Islam to criticize the extremist trends in theology is ironic. I mean, I always found it ironic also in the United States that criticisms that some people say are Islamophobic, people talk openly about. Muslim communities in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, and so forth, talk openly about without having that stigma. That stigma exists simply to try to shut down debate. Now, when it comes to Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is also someone that can be instructive as to history. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, of course, became a leading figure. And when I look at Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the one figure which I think best explains Recep Tayyip Erdogan's program, and it comes from Turkey's own interior ministry, is that Recep Tayyip Erdogan, under him, the murder rate of women inside Turkey has increased 1,400%. That's a Turkish Interior Ministry statistic. Now, Recep Tayyip Erdogan famously said, I am the Imam of Istanbul. I am the servant of Sharia. The Turkish army is the army of Muhammad. But then people said, no, he changed. Never mind, he said, democracy is like a streetcar. You ride it as far as you need and then you step off. Now, European liberals, American liberals, and progressives wanted to embrace Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They wanted to believe that he really was in favor of democracy because he used the rhetoric of democracy. They actually said, for example, we need to unwind the constitutional controls of the Turkish military because that's undemocratic, but they never created another check and balance. And when you undo a check and balance, then you allow the ideologues to push right through. Back to terrorism. Another problem we have in the United States is we look at terrorism as a grievance. It was because of a dictatorship. It's because of occupation. It's because of a lack of education or lack of employment. And if only we resolve those, terrorism goes away. No. It's about ideology, and we need to confront that ideology head on. Now, there are other certain warning signs as I conclude my talk, which I think we need to address. Number one, religious freedom is the canary in the coal mine. You can't have democratic reform and stage pogroms against Hindus. You can't have democratic reform and kill Christians. It simply is not possible. There is not a single example on earth. You can be a naive economist. You can bear a personal grudge and talk the right talk to the West. But that doesn't mean you're a Democrat. At best, it means you're a useful idiot. Now, the other thing we need to worry about is not only the arrest of politicians like Fazla Karim Chaudhry, who had turned his district into a haven for Hindus. We also need to understand when you arrest journalists like Farzan Rupa or Shahil Ahmed, the only reason you're silencing journalists is because you can't address the criticisms they're making. You're afraid that they're going to actually criticize your own interim government, your own unelected government. And that too is a warning sign along with religious freedom. No journalist committed murder. And the fact that you're so over the top and you live in such an echo chamber as to believe this shows that the situation is 10 times worse than many people in the West are led to believe. Now, we talked a lot about history, and we started with a moment of silence about the genocide in 1971. We need to understand, for example, when it came to Jamaat-e-Islami, it was the only group outside of the Nazis that had ever been systematically went to a judicial process for its complicity in such genocide. You know, you can pretend that you're reformed, but a reformed Al-Qaeda is still Al-Qaeda. A reformed war criminal is still a war criminal. And if we want to look at the situation objectively, pushing forward, then there really is no choice for the United States. We need to apply global Magnitsky Act sanctions to Muhammad Yunus for the crimes he's committing against the Bangladeshi people, against journalists, and against religious figures. Being a Nobel laureate does not give you carte blanche to become a war criminal. That is not the case with Abiy Ahmed, who is guilty of genocide in Tigray. It's not the case with Aung San Suu Kyi. The fact of the matter is that Muhammad Yunus needs to be judged by his actions, not an award he received almost 20 years ago. That's number one. Number two, we've got to recognize Jamaat-e-Islami for what it is. When you're springing Al-Qaeda from power, when you're targeting minorities, when you're staging pogroms, when that is your platform, when you're liaising with Al-Qaeda and other figures, with Lashkar-e-Taiba, then you are a terrorist group. And the best thing the United States can do in a bipartisan fashion is to designate Jamaat-e-Islami as a foreign terrorist organization.
Yes!
So,
we love you!
With that, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to apologize that I can't stick around for longer. My wife is traveling and I need to get back to my kids. But I want to applaud you for what you're doing, for your advocacy, and keep up the good fight.
Thank you for coming.
Bangladesh, and next speaker is Dr. Dilip Nath. Dr. Dilip Nath is a distinguished leader in higher education and healthcare. Recognized for advocating for voting rights, Dr. Nath has authored several books, including First 100 Days of Dr. Yunus' Government. He emigrated from Bangladesh to the U.S. at 16 and has since lived in New York, earning trust as a dedicated leader and political activist. Dr. Nath holds a doctorate in business administration, an MBA in technology management, and an executive certificate in public policy from Harvard University. Once again, we welcome Dr. Dilip Nath.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Priya, for this kind introduction. Few minutes ago, Congressman Swazi, who is a congressman from Congressional District 3, chair of the bipartisan caucus, who came and had to leave because he has a committee meeting, I believe. And we thank Congressman Swazi and his staff. I think Taz is still here somewhere. But there will be few more Congress members will be here, and they will be, I also want to thank all the representatives from various Congress persons, including my very own Grace Mang, send her best, and also remaining of the staff. Obviously, I don't know all of you, but thank you for being with us and listening our story today. Friends, first of all, I stand before you as a survivor, Hindu of persecution, religious persecution in Bangladesh. I also bring greetings from the 18 million Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians that are living in Bangladesh in a very harmful way. I also want to take a moment to thank Utsav Chakraborty and for all the organization for organizing this hearing today. And all of you, those of you travel from various parts of the city to rise up and fight back for our rights. Friends, on this very day, in the dark night of March 25th, 1971, 3 million people were brutally murdered. One of the bloodiest genocide in the history was conducted by Pakistani army and Jamaat Islam, known as terrorist organization, as Rubin had said. 10,000 students were murdered at the Jagannath Hall, a Hindu dormitory in Dhaka University. These are the stories. 54 years later, we experienced the same genocide under the Yunus Nobel laureate, Dr. Yunus government. Friends, I want you to take a look at the video that should give you a glimpse of what is happening in Bangladesh now. We'll show that you can help with that.
Is Bangladesh the next Afghanistan?
Probably not.
Independent and democratic Bangladesh is being targeted for regime change by a radical religious group that aims to seize power. Using students as their front line, the so-called Justice Tribunal began a violent uprising in July-August 2024, leading to a deadly conflict orchestrated through well-planned domestic and foreign conspiracies. On August 5, 2024, the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was overthrown. She was forced to leave the country. Although the uprising was initiated under the guise of student-led justice, in reality, extremist groups and various opposition forces collaborated to unleash destruction across Bangladesh. Key national institutions were attacked and destroyed, and many ordinary students and civilians lost their lives. To terrorize the police and public, dead bodies were hanged from foot over bridges and trees. A police station in Surajganj was attacked, resulting in the deaths of 17 police officers. Nationwide, nearly 400 police installations were assaulted, causing widespread destruction.
এটা আসলে কয়েকশো মারা গেছে এবং ব্রুটালি মারা গেছে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় পুলিশ সদস্যদেরকে রাস্তায় ফেলে আন্দোলনকারী লোকরা জবাই করেছে। যদি মেট্রো রেলে আগুন না দেওয়া হতো, যদি পুলিশদেরকে না মারা হতো, তাহলে বিপ্লবটা তো সহজেই অর্জিত হতো না।
Following the fall of the Awami League government, extremist groups launched coordinated attacks on Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian communities. Their homes and places of worship were looted and burned across the country. Law and order collapsed, paving the way for the rise of religious extremists. Since Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's ouster in August 2024, the government under Yunus has freed convicted Islamic terrorists. Downplayed was violence against minorities and let jihadist mobs take over streets. The Yunus government enabled these radical groups to gain power, leading to mass arrests and targeted assassinations of Awami League leaders and activists. By February 5th, extremists had demolished the historic residence of Father of the Nation Sheikh Mujibur Rahman at Danmondi, replacing it with an international terrorist group ISIS flag. Hizb ut-Tahrir openly held demonstrations in Dhaka, showcasing their growing influence. Interim government leader Dr. Yunus, along with key advisors like Mahfouz Alam, Asif Mohammed, and former advisor Nahid Islam, were revealed to be members of extremist groups. They formed a new political alliance and pushed Bangladesh towards civil war. Some of the major groups, which were previously banned but under leadership of Muhammad Yunus, now encouraged, include Jamaat-e-Islam, Tawhidi Janata, Hizb ut-Tahrir, Hafazat-e-Islam, and Ansarullah Bangla Team. The radical Islamic organizations in Bangladesh share the same main goal, a global Islamic caliphate. If the Islamic takeover succeeds in Bangladesh, the country will become another Islamic terror state like Afghanistan.
Nice video.
So as you can see from the short video, after the fall of Sheikh Hasina government on August 5th, the country has become a total lawless. Within the first 15 days of Yunus government, there was over 2,000 incidents took place across the country. That includes burning the houses, destroying the temple, library, museum, historical places. And they were all conducted by the mob. Over the span of 8 months under Yunus government, over 3,500 police officers was killed and hanged. Friends, you don't see this in the mainstream media because Professor Yunus has spent millions of dollars through his PR firm to portray his own narrative. And after his 900 days, I have published a book called First 100 Days of Yunus Government. We have listed the incident that took place in the first 100 days. Imagine how many incidents has been happened since then. Just few days ago, our National Security Director Tulsi Gabbard, she had made a statement. The continuous threat and ongoing atrocities against Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians and other religious in minority. These issues front and center of US and also particularly the Trump administration. But we must not forget, these are the same people who believe in an ideology funded by the same global group and simply to implement and rule the government by Islamic Caliphate.
Sharia law.
And of course, by and large, implementing Sharia law. And what we already have seen in the last couple of weeks, rape and gang rape had become a norm in every day in Bangladesh. There is no one, virtually no one safe anymore. Women simply cannot walk in a broad daylight without being fear of their life and simple safety. This is what we are living with. Friends, we gather here today. Many of you took time to express your voice. This Congress has a responsibility and duty to protect the most vulnerable people in the earth now, and also combat this rise of terrorism. They might be in Bangladesh today, but you know what? When 9/11 happened, those are some of the people that were trained in Bangladesh camp. We have seen that Bangladesh once upon a time was cocoon of terror. And now they hibernated for so long. They're uprising again. We must condemn them. We must protect the civilian. And we must stand with the people so that democracy can still sustain and survive in Bangladesh. With that, I want to leave you with this. And as Dr. King said, injustice anywhere, the threat to justice everywhere. So friends, I want to leave you with that. I want to thank you all again for standing with us and fighting for our justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stignath. That was a very powerful presentation, and the visuals will stick in our minds until we can find an answer. At this moment, I'm going to take a short break from our regular program because we have a esteemed representative, Linto Thomas, from Sri Thanadar's office. Sri Thanadar couldn't be here in person, but he has an important message for the Bangladeshi community. So, Linto Thomas.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Linto Thomas, I'm Congressman Canada's Chief of Staff. And the Congressman wishes he could be here, but he got caught up in some important meetings and was not able to make it out. But I'm here to deliver some remarks on behalf of the Congressman. Congressman Sri Canada represents Michigan's 13th District in the United States Congress. And as someone who has experienced discrimination firsthand, the Congressman is deeply concerned about the recent reports of anti-Hindu violence in Bangladesh. Protecting the rights of all people, regardless of their faith, is a fundamental value that the Congressman holds dear. And unfortunately, these reports of anti-Hindu violence have increased in both frequency and severity, making the Congressman deeply concerned about the well-being of Hindus in the region. Since the regime change in Bangladesh on August 5, 2024, we have witnessed a surge in religious persecution under the pretense of political reprisals. The Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian communities, who have long been an integral part of Bangladesh, are now facing systemic attacks and forced conversions. And in just the past few months, hundreds have lost their lives, temples have been desecrated, and entire communities have been driven from their homes in fear. One of the most egregious examples of this persecution is the unjust imprisonment of Hindu monk Chinmoy Krishna Das, whose only crime was his faith. And after defending Das, his lyre was brutally murdered, sending a hateful message to anyone who dares speak out against these atrocities. Simply condemning these injustices are not enough. As the most powerful nation in the world, we cannot turn a blind eye to these blatant assaults on religious freedom. We must take strong action to ensure the long-term safety of these religious minorities. Specifically, Congressman Tanadar urges the Trump administration to take immediate steps to secure Chinmoy Krishna Das's release and ensure justice for his father's attorney. This also includes the designation of Jamaat-e-Islami as a foreign terrorist organization, or FTO. The State Department must designate this group as an FTO under Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This extremist group and its affiliated proxies pose a direct threat to regional stability, democracy, and security of religious minorities. Their influence extends beyond Bangladesh, with operations here in the United States that must be investigated. Additionally, we need conditional economic aid and de-radicalization of Islamic education. The U.S. must condition future economic aid to Bangladesh on the implementation of a comprehensive de-radicalization program within its schooling system. The current radical teachings in schools have fueled the rise of groups aligned with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, threatening not only Bangladesh, but the broader Indo-Pacific region. Additionally, we need protection of religious minorities and prevention of demographic decline. The Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian populations of Bangladesh are falling due to relentless persecution. If current trends continue, these communities will face complete demographic erasure within a generation. The U.S. must work with international partners to establish safe zones within Bangladesh for religious minorities so they can flourish again, free from violence. And we need targeted sanctions against perpetrators of religious violence. The Departments of State and Treasury should impose Magnitsky-esque sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for orchestrating violence against religious minorities in Bangladesh. Those who enable and fund these atrocities, whether from within Bangladesh, Pakistan, or China, must face severe economic and legal consequences. The United States has long been a champion of human rights and religious freedom. We cannot afford to remain passive observers when religious freedom is being violated so blatantly. This is not just about one country, it is about the principles of religious freedom, equal treatment, and human dignity that define us as a nation. As someone who has personally witnessed the dangers of religious discrimination, the Congressman Tanadar stands not just as a policymaker, but as a defender for those whose voices are being silenced. We must remember that history will not judge us by our words, but our actions. Thank you.
Great job.
Thomas for delivering that message to our group. Not only did Congressman highlight the specific problems that are at the cusp of the crisis that is unfolding in Bangladesh, he provided actionable items for our current administration to take up. So there is no excuse from our part as Americans to do our job correctly and to influence our lawmakers to do the same. So our next speaker is Ms. Priya Shah. Priya Shah is a community activist from Bangladesh who had to flee the country and seek refuge in the U.S. in 2019 after she highlighted the rising threats to Hindus and other religious minorities. Currently, she is the president of the South Asian Minorities Collective and the executive director of Human Rights Congress for Bangladesh. Priya has played a key role in introducing the 2022 bipartisan resolution 1430 to recognize the 1971 genocide by Pakistani army and its allied Islamists. Hearing now from a direct survivor of the 1971 carnage is Ms. Priya Shah.
Just before Priya starts to speak, I want to recognize somebody very special here who is the author of the 1971 genocide resolution that was introduced in a bipartisan manner in 2022. We have with us Mark Erstein. He is the senior foreign policy advisor at the U.S. Congress House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he was the author of that amazing resolution that was discussed and continues to be discussed even today. So thank you, Mark, for taking some time out of your busy schedule and coming here. Thank you.
May I also request folks to see that their cell phones are on silent. Once again, in case you've forgotten, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, everyone, and especially Utsav Chakraborty and his team. And we are working together to organize such a strong congressional briefing in due time. And thank you, all of our team members. Today, first I remember today is the 25th March. In 1971, the Pakistani army they started Operation Searchlight in the name of Operation Searchlight. Within 3 days, they murdered more than 100,000 people. And mostly, they started from Jagannath Hall, the Hindu dormitory and police and our border security force and Hindu people in the old Dhaka. Next, today my presentation about the missing minority or missing Hindu from Bangladesh. So why these people are missing? The millions of people lost life and dignity due to the partition of Bharat. Partition demanded by Muslim community. The Muslim will never be able to live in peace if they are in the minority alongside a Hindu majority, and emphasize that it is impossible for two societies to coexist within a single nation. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the president of All India Muslim League. Now I am just giving what he told. They cannot live peacefully. The truth is just opposite. The statistics shows in 1948, West Pakistan, the Hindu was around 3% and Muslim were 96%. And in Bangladesh, the Hindu was 29.70% and Muslim was 69%. And in India, the Hindu was 84.10% and Muslim was 9.80%. Next we come 1972. What happened in Pakistan? The Hindu community reduced 1.60% and the Muslim community increased. And in India, the Hindu community decreased 82.70 and the Muslim community increased 11.20. And what happened in Bangladesh, the East Pakistan or Bangladesh, the Hindu population come down 14% and the Muslim community increased 85%. What is the present situation? Now, in 2022, the Pakistan, the Hindu population come down 1.50% and the Muslim has a rise. And in Bangladesh, the Hindu community come down 7.5% and Muslim increase up to 92%. And in India, just opposite, the Hindu, they are also the majority Hindu country, decrease Hindu and Muslim increase up to 15%. So what's the summary is here? The summary is here that both the Pakistan and in Bangladesh, the Hindu community decreased a huge way. And where I got this information, it's all information I collected from the census document of Bangladesh government. And in Bangladesh, within this time, the people come down from 29.7% to 7.50%. So you can understand what's going on. And I raised this issue. I met President Trump in 2019.
Oh yes, you are.
And talked about it, and from then I am on exile here. I came here for 3 days, and I'm here around 6 years. And this issue, the research by Shashi Dastidar, a renowned professor of University of New York, he found 49 million people missing from Bangladesh from after partition. And this point raised by the Congressperson Robert Dole from Illinois, he raised this issue in US Congress. And the prominent professor of Bangladesh, Professor Abul Barakat, he did our research and he showed, he did research on Enemy Property Act and he showed that every day up to 50 years, 632 people have to leave Bangladesh. According to Bakrat, his book, Political Economy of Reforming Agricultural Land, Water Bodies in Bangladesh, migration was highest between 1991 to 2012, reaching 774 people per day. They have to leave Bangladesh. And in Chittagong Hill Tracts, comprising the 3 districts, in 1947, during the partition of India and Pakistan, the CST, comprising the district of Bandarban, Khagrachari and Rangamati, was the home to 98.5% indigenous Jumma non-Muslim community. CST had decreased to 51%. By 2011, the proportion of non-Muslim now. And why they decreased the population? The world's largest Hindu genocide in 1971. Hindu was made up 18.5% in 70, and by 74, the Bangladesh government census, it dropped 13.5%. During the liberation war, Pakistani force, along with Bangladeshi Rajakar or Badur militia, murdered 2.7 million Hindus and raped over 400,000 women. Most of them were Hindu. Between the two censuses, the 1961 and 1974, the difference, the missing Hindu was 38.7 million. According to the Indian refugee data, in India, there was 11.6 million Hindu in their record. So if we deduct from 38.7 million to 11.6 million, so it comes 27 million. So this 27 million murdered by Pakistani army during the war in 1971. And why people are missing? That is the impact of Listed Property Act in Bangladesh. More than around 925,050 Hindu households affected, the 40% of the family. 2.6 million acre lost, 53% of Hindus' own land is Bangladesh, 5.3% of Bangladesh total land. And since 1948, 75% religious minorities' land confiscated by the Bangladesh government. On Hindu lost land every 5 minutes for 6 decades. And why this population are decreasing? Because of violation of religious minority, killing, abduction, sexual violence. Hindu, Christian, Buddhist and indigenous people face violence that often goes unpunished. Village attack, destruction and religious site, burning village, vandalized temple, churches and pagoda rarely result in legal consequences. False case and land seizure, false accusation against religious minority are not penalized, and land is often seized under the Enemy Property Act. Abduction of minority girl. Police fail to locate abducted girl until they become pregnant. Sexual violence against minority, rape of Hindu and indigenous women is rarely persecuted. You can see a picture where 13 people are burned in a home. You can see the burned people picture on the side. And still now, this criminal become an elected local government representative. Nobody punished.
We wanna fight.
And thank you all for hearing me. And as an American people, you can understand what's happening in Bangladesh and how these people can survive. And what need to do is upon you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Priya, for sharing your story and letting the world hear about what many Bangladeshis have gone through. Our next speaker is Arifa Rahman Ruma. Arifa is an associate professor of Bangladesh Open University and the former counselor at Embassy of Bangladesh in Washington, D.C. Today, she will share her personal experience of being a target of radical jihadists. Please welcome
¿Cuál es la
Ms.
que eres?
Arifa Rahman Ruma. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Today is Genocide Day in Bangladesh. At first, I pay my deepest respect for 3 million martyrs, 400,000 with women. I witnessed the happened during July-August last year and its aftermath. I barely escaped Bangladesh on August 12 after facing an interrogation. The day after arrival at Washington, D.C., I got a letter from Ministry of Foreign Affairs ordering me to report to Bangladesh office within 2 weeks, although they did not provide me with necessary means to travel as per the diplomatic norms. Knowing fully well that Bangladesh was being led by radical Islamist group, I decided to stay back here, fearing persecution, jail, even assassination. I had been threatened by the radical groups twice before due to my stand on the issues of women's rights. Back then, there was law and order and courts were functioning. I filed a GD, that means General Diary, with a local police station and was protected by the law. But now, situation is quite opposite. Bangladesh is no longer the country it once was. Since August 5, the nation has spiraled into unprecedented chaos. Religious and gender minorities live in the constant fear, targeted by assault, arson, and rampant vandalism. The rule of law has collapsed to its lowest point in decades. In just 5 days after the fall of the Aoun Lig government, 205 attacks against minorities are recorded across 52 districts. This wave of terror follows an even more chilling event, an unprecedented campaign of violence against law enforcement officers, a dark chapter in Bangladesh history. Today, I'll lay before you the harsh realities of these regime's actions, supported by the widely reported news and documented evidence. While time permits me to highlight only a few cases, I have provided a comprehensive written report for your review. Mobs attack police officers across Bangladesh, leading to mass killing. Despite widespread brutality, the government granted immunity to the perpetrators. From July 2024, police officers were hunted down, tortured, beaten to death, burned alive, and hanged from trees across the country. Mobs stormed police facilities, vandalized, looted, and killed officers on duty. While the Bangladesh police officially acknowledged only 44 deaths between July and August, independent reports suggest the real death toll runs into the thousands. Some 450 police stations have been attacked since August 5. Police officers, including pregnant women, were burned to death. At the same time, huge piles of arms and ammunition looted, which is now known by the radical Islamist group. The agony and frustration within the force are further compounded when the interim government granted immunity to the attackers, taking no action against those who who murdered officers under the guise of student protesters. More than 205 attacks targeted religious minorities post-August 5. Houses, places of worship, and business establishment of religious minorities are attacked at various places of the country after since 5 August. Lynching incidents have increased since the regime change in Bangladesh, particularly affecting minorities communities. On September 30, a mob of radical Islamists, fueled by blasphemy accusations, attempt to lynch Partho Bishwas Pintu in Potia. Similarly, the assault on Utsav Mondol in Khulna and the death of Hridoy Robidar highlight the ease with which communal violence can be spurred. The role of mob announcements in inciting mob actions underscores the involvement of organized networks in these attacks. More than 100 homes and shops belonging to the indigenous Chakma community were torched by illegal Muslim plain settlers in the Boalkhali and Dikinala Sodor area of Khagrachori district. A Buddhist temple was also set and established in the remote region home to numerous national minorities. Indigenous students are attracted in Dhaka for protesting against textbook erasures of their history. In recent months, Bangladesh has witnessed alarming incidents of mob violence on university campuses, raising critical concerns about public safety and the rule of law. On September 18, Tofajul Hossain, a 32-year-old man with known mental health issues, was apprehended at Dhaka University Fazlul Haq Muslim Hall on suspicious of theft. Students detained and subjected him to prolonged physical abuse over several hours. Incident 2. On September 18, Shami Mohammed, a former student leader of Jahangirnagar University, Chhatoli, was attacked by fellow students at the university Prantik Gate, accused of prior assault on quota reform protester and alleged involvement in criminal activities. Shami was beaten multiple times, even in the presence of university security and the proctor. He was eventually taken into police custody and transported to Ganashastha Hospital, where he died from his injury. More than 80 shrines and Darbar Sharifs have been attacked by extremist groups across Bangladesh in last 7 months, according to the Global Sufi Organization. At least 3 football matches in Bangladesh were cancelled after Islamist protesters from religious schools vandalized the venue in Dinajpur, Jaipur Hat, and Rangpur. Islamist radicals, long considered a fringe group in Bangladesh, managed to stop 3 women's football friendly matches in the north of the country, raising fears and increasing Talibanization in what was until recently as a moderate Muslim nation and core on liberal Bengali language driven syncretic culture. Since July, faculty members across Bangladesh universities have faced harassment. Professor Abdul Bashir, Dean of the Faculty of Arts at Dhaka University, was coerced into resigning under mob pressure. In a shocking display, students forced him to recite the Quran as supposed atonement for alleged Islamophobia. Forcible and undignified registration relations of the head of different educational institutions from schools, college, are continuing across the country. Several other videos of teachers being forced to resign made the round on social media. At least 49 teachers from minority communities have been forced to resign from their positions. In January and February 2025, 337 women and girls were tortured, raped, or murdered in Bangladesh. When activities marched to demand justice, police blocked their path and unleashed violence on demonstrations, including females. Bangladesh stands at the edge of precipice. Mob rule is supplanting due process, academic freedom in under siege, and law enforcement has been an instrument of repression rather than protection. The fundamental rights to employment, safety, and justice are eroding at the alarming pace. Thank you.
Thank
Minority voices on Bangladesh, instead focusing more on the narratives delivered by Jamaat-e Islami proxies like IGNA and MOVE. Please welcome Mr. Yotosh Dey.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am happy to have this opportunity to come here.
Thank you.
To speak about genocide and Hindu genocide and other religious minority genocides in Bangladesh. And first of all, I thank to Utsav Chakraborty and his organization, Into Action, who actually organized this type of event, a briefing for congressional hearings. Hopefully, we will be going forward for genuine conventional hearing to hear the voice of minorities in Bangladesh. This story didn't take place in one day. I know that this is too late to say. I think I will give some short presentation. And when the partition was taken place in 1947, on the religious identity, but it didn't take place properly. And the suffering started from that day. Until today, we have been suffering, especially minorities in Bangladesh. Every time the government change, the persecution is continuing on the minorities in Bangladesh. And last but not least, I can say from August 5, 2024, when the regime changed, over 2,000 attacks in 16 days. The first 16 days, 2,000 attacks. 157 families targeted, 69 temples attacked, minority teachers forced to resign, and young Hindu women abducted and dead. So this is just for 2 weeks incident. You have been hearing the news of all the speakers earlier. They have given, and you saw the videos, how pathetic, how misfortune happens to the minorities in Bangladesh. So even though the organization have been raising their voice to address the issue since 1947, there are lots of riots took place. And likewise, these organizations, my SPA, Partition Center, Indian Subcontinental Partition Documentation, have been working last 30 plus years. And raising the voice, taking interviews, giving the witness, hundreds of people, thousands of people, if you go website, you will find it. There are thousands of witnesses. They speak in their misery, loss of lives, their homes, their lands, but still it is keep going on. So, as a chairman of Indian Subcontinental Partition Documentation, today I came just a very brief to draw the attention of US Congress so that this could be the last attempt to raise the voice, and hopefully the voice will be heard. Here you can say the policymakers in Washington continue to ignore secular and minority voices in Bangladesh. This is very true. Ignoring secular and minority voices in Bangladesh and Jamaat-e-Islami proxies and radical Islamic groups influence in Washington. And that is also another truth. Today, March 25, 2025, and I am today presenting this brief to draw the attention. In introduction, there is a key issue. US policy on Bangladesh often focuses on Islamist groups like Jamaat-e-Islami, JEI, and their proxies ICNA, MUNA, while ignoring the voices of secular and minorities communities. This is very unfortunate. We have been hearing there are hundreds of people came all the way from New York and New Jersey just to be witness that these things is going to be presented for congressional hearing. And what is the impact? The impact is the oversight shapes policies that don't reflect the diverse realities on the ground in Bangladesh, affecting mainly the minorities, religious minorities, religious minorities, and other secular activists. So, Bangladesh political landscape. I have very short time, so I am going to just give the headlines. I am sorry for this minutes. Please ignore that.
Do you have a flyer? A flyer for that?
Yes.
Okay.
I will deliver it. So, secular foundation. Bangladesh was founded as a secular state, but groups like Jamaat-e-Islami have increasingly gained influence in politics. How? The majorities are Muslims in Bangladesh, and the minorities left, as I told you. So always those influence is destructively impact to those minorities. And what the impact? The secular and minorities communities, Hindus, Christians, and other Buddhists and indigenous faces violations each time. Whenever there are some instability in the government, instability in the politics, also in other countries, if there are some religious impact, they always goes to the impact to the minorities in Bangladesh. And what is that? Forced conversion and exclusion from the political processes. So that is very unfortunate. All the voices raised around the world, but that never heard. So the role of proxies, especially Jamaat-e-Islami, what is that? The groups like ICNA and MUNA, aligned with Jamaat-e-Islami, push a narrative that sidelines secular or minority voice. So whenever there are huge wave comes, and those all the other small voices, they wipe away. So we are the victim, the minorities, Buddhist, Christian, and other indigenous peoples are victim. So what is Washington's focus? This group dominate US discourse on Bangladesh, presenting a skewed view of the country's politics and the social landscape, because they are the powerful tools, they have the powerful lobbying, they have the powerful pressure group, they have the powerful advocacy. Unfortunately, those voices are unheard. And especially there is a YouTube, if you go there in this link, and it was explained what Jamaat-e-Islami and their proxies, what have been doing, especially such countries in Bangladesh. So, what is the root cause? Why our voices are not heard? That is a big question. We have been raising, we went thousands of people, we raised our voice in front of United Nations, in front of Washington offices, and US administration completely silent, and our voice never heard to the human rights or United Nations or religious freedom, whatever organizations around there. So the reason is Islamization of politics. The rise of politics, Islam has marginalized secular perspectives and minorities. So that's the reason. Another reason is state inaction. The Bangladesh government often fails to hold radical groups accountable, contributing to minority oppression. Even they are silent, their inaction, not to bring justice, they are encouraging people to do the oppression and persecution. That is the unfortunate fate of minorities. And religious hostility. So, social discrimination and violence against minorities prevent their voices from being heard both in Bangladesh and internationally. So, the discrimination and also discriminated behaviors is also strong that those always take place. Their voices always take place. They have, as I told you, the pressure group, the advocacy, always contributing to the religious hostility. International narrative. Islamist groups like Jamaat-e-Islami and their proxies effectively control the narrative in Washington, pushing out secular voices. So this is happening till today, and we all are the witness of the deep state activity, what happened even the last government change. So unfortunately, these powerful tools will never go to our minorities' favor. Now, consequences of ignoring secular and minority voices. So policy impact, US policies based on radical Islamist narratives are out of touch with the diverse relatives in Bangladesh. So these policies directly impacting until we are really reached to the administration to bring the policies, to change the policies, our suffering will never come to the vision. Strengthening extremism. The approach inadvertently empowers radical groups, sidelining democratic and human rights efforts. Whatever efforts we are going to do it, always they are going to be sidelined. And also missed opportunities. The lack of support for secular and minority voices prolongs their marginalization. We are here, I hope that all the congressional people are here, the powerful bodies are here, policymakers are here. So I believe that we will together will support it, we will work together, and this time our voice will be heard.
Will be heard, no doubt. Yes.
Thank you. Now,
No doubt, will be heard.
what is the recommendation? So I'm seeing here,
Enough is enough.
recommendation is engage diverse voices, include secular and minorities communities in discussions on Bangladesh's future. Shift away from radical groups. Avoid policies that inadvertently empower extremist factions. List on the last. Support democratic values. Ensure US policy aligns with human rights, democracy and minority protection in Bangladesh. Please raise your voice together. So, in conclusion, again I am reminding, please, what is the conclusion? To call an action, balanced representation. US policy should reflect the full diversity of Bangladesh, supporting secular and minority voices for a better future. The role of Congress. The congressional hearings should include a wide range of perspective to ensure US policy aligns with democratic values. So I hope there will be any question and answers, but it will be end of the speech. I thank you all. And
I want to say something quickly. Can I say it just quickly?
We have to move on to the next.
okay, I think it will be on the end of the session. Thank you
At
very
the end
much
of the session,
for
I ask.
our voice, and thank you all.
Okay, I'll ask. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Pankaj.
you, Yogesh, for a very detailed presentation. Again, lots of action items on our part and our lawmakers' parts. Our last speaker today is Rana Hassan Mehmood. Rana is a prominent Bangladeshi American, a political analyst, columnist, and community organizer. Rana will speak about the connection between radical Islamists and their connection with the CCP and the Pakistani military. Please welcome Mr. Rana.
Wow.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The mic.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. First of all, I thank the organizer today and the distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I pay homage to 3 million victims of 1971 genocide. Today is the Genocide Day. I pay homage to 400,000 women who were raped during that period of time. My respect to the leadership who brought about the independence of Bangladesh under the leadership of our founding father, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Now, coming back to the point, the good thing about being the last speaker is that you can take as long as you want. So, my topic was the new axis that has been built under the leadership of the poster child of the world, poster child of the West, Dr. Yunus. That axis is China, Pakistan, and radical Islamists, mainly Jamaat, in Bangladesh. I don't want to bore you with my reading of several pages. I have prepared it for some congressional members. But I'll just go through the historical background. Bangladesh was founded on the principle of secularism, and we were the first secular state, I think, anywhere in the world that is secularism was enshrined into its constitution. The very next one was done by India in 1976. But after the assassination of our founding father in 1975, when the military junta took over the power under the leadership of General Zia, Jamaat-e-Islam, that was the genocidal criminal of 1971, they were allowed a political space in Bangladesh. From that point on, they thrived with the patronage from the military governments that ruled Bangladesh for 15 years. And they were funded well by the Middle Eastern funders. There was the first Rohingya refugees that came over end of 70s. So that was the time that they built their training camps in the deep forest in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. During that 15-year time, ISI also got a foothold in Bangladesh. They had training camps to instigate the insurgency in the northeastern states in India. Then there was 1991 election where BNP was just short of majority to form a government. That's why they needed help from Jamaat. And there was a undeclared alliance, and these two alliances found some common ground, that is using religion in the political sphere, namely Islam. Secondly, their common antagonism against India. And third, their common alliance with China. And if we recall, in 1971, when Jamaat was fighting tooth and nail against our liberation, during the same period of time, China was against our liberation too, and they vetoed twice between 72 and 74 against Bangladesh's inclusion into the United Nations. Then there was a brief power shift towards Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, 1996 to 2021, that ISI camps were dismantled, Jamaat's power was curtailed a little bit, and we had progress in the economy and in other spheres. Then, 2021, it was an open alliance between Jamaat and BNP. And it was a four-party alliance. They took over power. The very onset of they took over the power, there was an amazing brutality against the minorities and the Awami League supporters, only dwarfed by Dr. Yunus's brutality. So what happened now? What happened now is after August 5th, Chinese ambassador was the first one to meet Jamaati leader at their office in Mombasa in Dhaka. Then that was in September 2nd. Then in October, there was a delegation from led by Jamaat Islami, but other Islamic radicals, including Hifazat Islam. They were invited by the CCP in China. After that, there was BNP-led delegation in China. During the same period of time, it is an open secret that ISI chief with his delegation arrived in Dhaka. They visited the very sensitive Shiliguri area from Bangladesh border side. They visited Arakan army camps, arson camps in Cox's Bazar, just to instigate the volatile situation against India. As a matter of fact, during the time that Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister, from 2009 to August 2024, Bangladesh saw amazing progress simply because it maintained a very healthy, peaceful relationship with its neighbors. And it was the haven for investment. So what happened, looking back, what is happening right now? Tomorrow is our Independence Day in Bangladesh. This is one of the most sacred days in our history. And the same day, Dr. Yunus is visiting China. And he'll be meeting with the Chinese leaderships, trying to bring some loan and other things. The point is, my point to the congressman here, the Dr. Yunus has been the darling of the West. And he's actually backstabbing the West in two fronts, allowing the radical Islamists with clear and open ties with ISI and global network of terrorism to thrive in Bangladesh. At the same time, he's allowing China's dominance in Bay of Bengal stretching to Indian Ocean area, and how it's going to hurt our national security interest in that region. Our lawmakers, they have to understand. Our administration has to understand. And I thank Tulsi Gabbard. She understood the potential problems, but this China front has to be addressed. So, in conclusion, what I wrote is the role of China in promoting radical Islamists in Bangladesh presents a multifaceted challenge for U.S. security interests. As China continues to expand its influence through economic investments and political alliances, the potential rise of extremism poses a significant risk not only to Bangladesh but also to the broader South Asia region. Addressing this issue will require a coordinated response from the U.S. and its allies, focusing on countering radicalization, supporting democratic values, rebuffing China's strategic ambitions. While the Biden administration may have facilitated a regime change in Bangladesh, it inadvertently laid the groundwork for increased Islamic militancy and strengthened Chinese geopolitical dominance in the region, extending to vital Indian Ocean areas, resulting in a precarious situation for regional stability. Now, that's my conclusion, but I have something else to say. That's the kind of beginning of the end of the conclusion. I want to address to the US Congress directly in this solemn hall that we are present. You know, about 20 years ago, when Dr. Yunus was awarded Nobel Peace Prize, like many millions of Bangladeshis around the world, my heart teared up with pride and joy, because after all, it's a Nobel. Yes. Even though I was one of those very few who knew his scheme, how he was cheating the very vulnerable women, how he was putting them from abject poverty to the level of poverty and keeping them there for the rest of their lives. For last 20 years, he used his grabbing scheme, made it an enterprise first and an empire. He was loved and adored by Washington and Hollywood, even Silicon Valley, London and Paris, Tokyo, everybody was in its praise, while there were silent tears rolled into the hearts of those millions of poor women in Bangladesh. Now there's a different phase that we are looking at. Over last 20 years, what we know now, if we had known back then, I wish he had received a Nobel in physics rather than in peace. And through this organization and many organizations that we are working on to restore the sense in Bangladesh, as a matter of fact, one of the famous quote of Winston Churchill about Soviet Union applies to him. If I paraphrase that, from this very prestigious city, very powerful city, Dr. Yunus is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. To unwrap this mystery, we have to launch an investigation about his financial irregularities that we know is absolutely true, and we have documents.
Yes.
And because he has business entities in this country, and because he has donated fund in certain foundations with political ambition, and because he has made political comments, partisan political comments, being a citizen or non-citizen, that's a gray area still, we have the right to know how he made a grabbing bank and worldwide empire, how he is utilizing his influence to destroy the lives of the millions in our country and around the world. Bottom line is he has to be exposed. Now, if it comes out very nice, good luck for him. But more than likely, our congressmen, our senators, our administration will be surprised to know the hypocrisy of this guy. And we all have to work, and I will request that we work in tandem, that we request a full-blown congressional hearing on his financial irregularities as soon as possible before he destroys a country of 180 million people into oblivion. Somebody said that it's going to be next Afghanistan. No, it's going to be 10 times worse than Afghanistan, simply because of the density, the magnitude of the population, and the population surrounding our neighbors. So let us work together, and hopefully we will have a hearing sooner than later. And with that, I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our last speaker. On behalf of all the participants and the speakers who are present today, so if the audience members can make their way to the front, we will hold up a joint declaration. And we will, before we take that photo, Geeta Sikand will close the event with a vote of thanks. Geeta ji.
Thank you very much, Paraji, for the introduction. My name is Paraji Geeta Sikand, and I've been working with the Hindu Action Team as a representative of Americans for Hindus, a bipartisan super PAC. And a very heartfelt thanks on behalf of Americans for Hindus, bipartisan PAC. I want to offer my vote of thanks to Hindu Action and Utsav Chakrabarti ji and the Hindu Action Board for bringing this event to fruition. And I would be remiss if I did not share with you that we have with us Madhu Govil ji and Akhil Govil ji, who are the president of the Americans for Hindus PAC in Virginia chapter, and also, just as of last week, they are the president of the consortium of Hindu organizations, which means a number of leading organizations have now formed a consortium, and that includes Americans for Hindus and Hindu Action. And with that, thank you more than words can say for giving us an opportunity to be the voice for the voiceless Hindus in Bangladesh. Utsuvji, Faruji, I am moved beyond words at what you have done here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geeta-ji. We do have a very powerful voice from within the Hindu community who has joined us towards the end. But if she would like to speak for a minute or so as we conclude the event, I would like to welcome Ms. Crystal Cole.
Add something as Crystal comes to the stage. Crystal was a candidate for the US Congress in the primaries last year from Virginia, and she has been working with the Department of Defense for many decades. And interestingly enough, she resonates with the situation of the Hindus in Bangladesh very much so, because she comes from a heritage of the Kashmiri Hindus, and she has, and her family and her extended family has seen what it means to suffer at the hands of terrorists and radical Islamists. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for having me. Apologies, I came straight from DOD, and if you know the traffic from Virginia out, it's pretty dreadful. But it's an honor to be here. I've spoken at a few other Hindu Action events. As Utsav said, my family hails from Kashmir and Punjab, and half. And my father's side of the family, they all fled Kashmir in 1989. So I definitely understand the plight of Hindus who are under siege. You know, the frustration of not having people acknowledge it, and especially as someone, you know, I was a young intern on Capitol Hill here over 2 decades ago, and I tried to raise these issues. I would go and see, they have a Kashmir Heritage Week, and it was all this propaganda that was very, you know, pro-Pakistan and pro-Azad Kashmir. And, you know, as like a 19-year-old, there's not a lot you can do, but I did raise it, and within a few weeks, Gulab Nabi Bhai, if you're familiar with that name, I confronted him. I went to his office and I said, "You're spewing all this propaganda." He denied everything, and then he got arrested a week later because he was being funded by the Lashkar-e-Taiba. So everything did come out finally in the news, and you know, I do think that truth eventually does prevail. You know, I think that what's happening right now in Bangladesh is atrocious. We've seen a growth of Islamic extremism, you know, especially since August 5th of 2024 with the regime change. The role of the Muslim Brotherhood, especially as it aligns to Jamaat-e-Islami, Hafazat-e-Islam, and other groups that are shaping national policy. I think that this impact of religious violence and mob attacks is a threat to democratic values at large. So it's not just a threat to Hindus, but it's a threat to democracy as well. And we see these pogroms against Hindus, with this Christians, indigenous communities. They're all under siege. There's vandalism of temples. There's attacks on Durga Puja celebrations, forced conversions and land grabs. And I think the role of Pakistan and the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, in backing radical Islamist elements has to stop. U.S. policy recommendations for countering extremism and influence of the CCP needs to be implemented. The U.S. takes a very strong stance, obviously, against terrorism. As someone who's a former director of the Department of Defense, as someone who's worked my entire career in national security, I can say that vehemently. But I do think that oftentimes, when it comes to South Asia, when it comes to certain issues within the region, they get overlooked. They don't quite make it to the national spotlight. They're not in primetime media. And for that reason, it doesn't hit the international agenda in a way that I think that it should. So You know, I grew up very proudly as a strong Hindu. I attended Vidyapeeth in New Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with that school. There's very few in the US, as I found out, but as a young girl at the age of 7, I studied Sanskrit, I studied Vedic heritage, I studied Kathak Bharatanatyam, and I learned how to read and write Sanskrit and Hindi, and I learned about all the mythology. I think it's very beautiful. It's something that our next generation should learn, and I think that we should really expand a Vidyapeeth network across the US. As I got older, I learned that this is not something that exists across lots of states. There's very few of them, and I do think that a lot of our youth generation, they don't, they're very disconnected. They're not aware of of the language, of the culture, of the tradition, of the religion, and I think that's something that we have to instill and we have to maintain as the generation grows up. So I'd say that it's really important to have the recognition here. It's important to make our voice known and heard. And I really appreciate my friend Utsav here, who I've known for almost over 20 years now, since I was young in college. And he's seen me in many rooms, whether it's Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, fighting against the whole Azad Kashmir agenda, whether it's in university classrooms or speaking on the campaign trail as well. But I love the work that Hindu Action does, and I support all of you for coming out here. And
Thank you, Crystal, for stopping by and sharing your message of support. So are we ready to have our joint declaration and invite people to the front?
We're not having any Q&A session at all.
We can. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. There is a time limit by which we have to clear out the room. So
We were supposed to have the room for another 2 more minutes, but nobody has warned us to kick us out yet. So we can keep going, but we just wanted to do our programming.
Right. Would you like to come to the front? And if we can keep it within 30 seconds?
I didn't mean to take the stage, but the whole Bangladeshi genocide that happened in the last few days is funded, planned, and orchestrated by US aid. Let us not forget that. It is that's what Trump administration is trying to fix the things, but it is completely planned, programmed, funded by United States AID. So we have to fight with our congressmen as President Trump is trying to clean the same USAID is bringing down this country in many different ways with wokeism and other things. So we have to speak up to the congressmen and senators and make sure that they work for the international peace for this country as well as peace in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. So please do come to the front as we gather. Utsav or I will state.
Next step you are going to do. This kind of seminar, yes, good. For our awareness. But what is the reason? What is the permanent solution? You have to find it out the permanent solution, and we have to urge the world to get a permanent solution. Thank you.
You recording?
ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে। আমার নাম পুলক চৌধুরী, আমি শ্রী নিকাশনের পক্ষ থেকে এসেছি। আমার প্রশ্নটা হলো, ইউএস গভর্নমেন্ট এত এভিডেন্স থাকার পরও কেন এত সময় নিচ্ছে বাংলাদেশ প্রেজেন্ট গভর্নমেন্টের বিরুদ্ধে? পুরো ওয়ার্ল্ডের সনাতনী গোষ্ঠীর দাবি, কেন ইউএস গভর্নমেন্ট এত সময় নিচ্ছে? They have a lot of evidence. Is enough. Why they take a long time?
Based in DC. I worked with TOD as for 6-7 years, and anyway, I know the intricacies of what's going on in Bangladesh. And I hope the Trump administration will get the message soon. Hearing such events, of course, Mr. Trump recently pardoned Mr. Haqqani and his associates, the Taliban leaders, who had a bounty $1 million. You probably know that. I hope there is a reason for it. But I hope also Mr. Trump will not be that lenient to Mr. Yunus, who is becoming another caliph in a hinterland called Bangladesh. Thank you.
Atlantic Cities is from CC Gita Sangha. My name is Pulak Chaudhary. My question is universal. Why U.S. government take them is to the Bangladesh government more time? They have is lot of evidence. It's enough. We need a immediate action for save the Hindus, Bangladesh community. We fight. It's enough. Thank you very much.
Come here for a second, please.
Gathered here today to have a congressional hearing on Bangladesh matter.